How's it going, everyone? This is Paul Garcia of ProjectSpurs.com, going through a recap of the free agency negotiations on June 30th. On Friday, that was the day that verbal agreements could be made between free agents and NBA teams. And so the San Antonio Spurs did make two moves on Thursday, even though the contracts can't officially be signed until the moratorium is lifted on June 6th next week. Okay, so let's begin with some of the keynotes on the players the Spurs agreed to deals with, and then kind of where their cap situation sits going forward. Okay, so these are called June 30th free agency negotiations. I'll also go into some rumors that were reported on Thursday. So as expected, the Spurs were able to bring back Tre Jones, according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN.com. The Spurs will be bringing back Jones on a 2-year, $20 million deal. So next season, he'll earn $10 million. And then they also came to an agreement with shooter Julian Champagnie on a 4-year deal for $12 million. This was also reported by Woj. And so Champagnie originally, if you remember, he was a restricted free agent to come back on a two-way roster spot. But then the Spurs decided to convert his contract and give him a full NBA deal, so he will be getting $3 million per year, which is more than the veteran minimum that he was projected to get. So he actually ends up doing a good job, considering that he had just joined the Spurs late in the season last year, and then he ends up carving a roster spot for himself, and so he will be on the full roster. Now, where does the Spurs' team roster sit now that Tre Jones and Champagnie are coming back for sure? They now have 13 players on guaranteed contracts, which means that between now and the first game of the regular season, they can add only up to 2 more players on guaranteed deals. Now, they can go over that maximum amount. They can actually add 21 players in training camp, but again, they would have to cut down their final roster to 15 players on guaranteed deals and 3 players on two-way deals. So we may see them make some more free agent signings. If they do, we do have to keep in mind that roster space before the first game of the regular season. One unrestricted free agent from the Spurs, Keita Bates-Diop, he ended up leaving. He's heading to go sign with the Phoenix Suns, so he agreed to join the Phoenix Suns next year. And then a player to keep an eye on is not a free agent. It's Cedi Osman of the Cleveland Cavaliers. According to Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports, he had this report at 6:10 my time, which is Mountain Time. So I think this is like 5:10 in San Antonio. Here's what Fisher wrote. He said, being told San Antonio is a team to monitor in the developing 3-team sign and trade talks that could bring Max Strus to Cleveland, the Cavaliers have been trying to find a team for Cedi Osman this week, sources said. So what would happen here is Miami would do a sign and trade with the Cavs and then include the Spurs as the third team, where Max Strus would end up going to Indiana, and then Indiana would send Cedi Osman to San Antonio because they have a lot of cap space still available that they can absorb his $6.7 million salary. So that's something to watch, is if the Spurs don't end up signing some more free agents, then maybe they look at a trade for someone like Cedi Osman where they can pull in his salary to get closer to the minimum team salary. That's something to watch as the days go on. And I do want to note that I'm recording this at midnight my time, which is Mountain Time. So in San Antonio, it's 1 a.m. So if there is any kind of breaking news after this point, then you all know why I didn't discuss it here on this short video. Okay, so that's wraps up some of the moves that the Spurs made. Now let's talk about where their cap sheet stands. So there's a lot of different avenues. So I'm going to really go bullet point by bullet point here. So with the cap holds, this is still having the cap hold of Romeo Langford. He hasn't signed anywhere. Sandro Mamukelashvili, he hasn't signed anywhere. And then having Jones and Champagnie and Dominic Barlow, the Spurs are over the minimum team salary. So this is $133.9 million in team salary right now with those cap holds. And that's okay, because again, you have to be at 122.4 before the first game of the regular season. The problem there, though, is that if Langford or Mamu end up going somewhere else, they sign with another team, their cap holds get renounced, and so then the Spurs would need to make up some money. And so let's talk about how much money they would need to make up. So there's a lot of different avenues in terms of projecting how much cap space the Spurs have. With Tre Jones's cap hold, Champagnie's cap hold, and Barlow's cap holds right now, the Spurs do sit right now with $30.8 million in cap space. If Jones and Champagnie their cap holds are renounced, so the way the Spurs can open up $38.5 million if they needed to, I don't think they will go this route, but if they needed to, they could basically renounce Jones and Champagnie's cap holds, make their signings, and sign Jones at $10 million for him as part of that 38.5, and then maybe use the room MLE, which is $7.7 million on Champagnie. And so again, they could get all the way up to 30.5. I don't think they're going to need to go to that route, but that's basically where they sit. They can go from like 30.8 to like 38.5 if they need to. They can do some maneuvering there. Now, the big question though that's been asked is how far are they from the salary floor? So let's just say that Langford gets a deal somewhere else and Mamu gets a deal somewhere else. So they're both gone. Now the Spurs do need to meet a certain number. They need to get to $122.4 million in cap space. So where do they sit if that happens? They're about $13 million away from getting to 122.4, because with Jones at 10 million and Champagnie at 3 million, so a combined 13 million, the Spurs' team salary is only at $109.3 million. So again, they're about $13 million short to getting to that 122.4. The good thing is for San Antonio is that they don't have to do that all in one day. They have all the way until the first game of the regular season, which is about mid-October, to make this happen. They could either continue to sign free agents or they can even trade for a player. So like if they trade for Cedi Osman, then that carves up out of that 13 million, $7 million is taken up. So then they would only need to find $6 million somewhere, whether that's giving a free agent like a bloated contract or again looking for trades. So there's all sorts of ways. They have a lot of time to fill in that $13 million of a space right there that they need to meet to get to that $122.4 million team salary. So that's something to watch going forward. And now just some notable things that I found after day one of negotiations. So a lot of teams basically spent their money. A lot of free agents are off the board. What makes it interesting is that the Spurs and Rockets are the only two teams with substantial cap space who can cross the give a free agent an offer that's bigger than the non-tax MLE. So the non-tax MLE right now is $12.4 million. And again, after all these teams have spent their money, only the Spurs, who have $30.8 million, and the Rockets, $23.6 million, are the only two teams left who can basically make an outside team or an outside free agent think about San Antonio or Houston if those teams approach those free agents. Now, there's obviously been no reporting so far. It's been very quiet. Aside from the Rockets, they ended up coming to terms with Fred VanVleet. But like some of the other marquee free agents out there, there's not really a lot left. But if they were out there, they're probably looking at San Antonio or Houston, who could probably make them a big offer nobody else can. And so really the two notable free agents I would say that are beyond those two those amounts, that 12.4 million, who are still on the board right now, is Austin Reaves of the Lakers. Now he is a restricted free agent, and all indications are that the Lakers will match his qualifying. Will match an offer sheet if someone sends it to him. And so his projected range is 12 to 14 million, but because he's a restricted free agent, you would probably have to send him close to the max for him to try to pry him away from LA to see if they would match. And then lastly, Brook Lopez it's been interesting now, multiple hours since free agency began, and he hasn't re-signed with the Milwaukee Bucks just yet. So his contract projection is very similar to like Jakob Poeltl, where it's like in that $18 to $20 million range. And so I know that there's been reporting that the Rockets really want him. We all thought that he would end up back in Milwaukee. But as of right now, as of midnight Mountain Time, he's still an unrestricted free agent. So Brook Lopez and Austin Reaves are two players to watch if the Spurs or Rockets want to try to get interesting here and try to send some big offers at either of those two players. Those are two of the most notable players who are expected to get more than the MLE still left on the board. There's also a few other restricted free agents as well out there. And then something also to keep an eye on is extensions can now begin now that midnight on the East Coast began. Some of the veteran players can start signing extensions if they're reached with their teams. And so we've already seen that Desmond Bane of the Memphis Grizzlies signed an extension. So did there was another player, Tyrese Halliburton, also of the Pacers. So that's just something to keep an eye on, because this is a situation where Devin Vassell finds himself. If Vassell and the Spurs were to come to an agreement on an extension, it can finally be announced right now in terms of a verbal agreement. Okay, so that kind of wraps up day one for negotiations. So now we are heading to Saturday, July 1st through 6th. What that means is that's the NBA moratorium, where basically teams can sign their rookies. So we might see like Victor Wembanyama get signed. Players on first round drafted players can sign their deals. We can see those transactions happen. Veteran free agents, anybody who's signing a veteran minimum contract, can start signing deals. So you might see those deals get published. And then if an offer sheet is sent to someone like Austin Reaves, then the matching team, which is like the Lakers, they wouldn't have to have a response until moratorium lifts on July 6th, which is at noon Eastern time on July 6th. So there's a few limitations of what can happen on July for these next 5 days from July 1st through 6th, but some transactions can take place. So we'll kind of see what happens with the Spurs. like I said, they got Jones back, they got Champagne back on the roster, and now we'll see what happens with how they use basically make up that $13 million in space that they need to make up right now is what it looks like. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia.